I'm not sure if everybody is aware, or if anybody is aware of this. I taught for a while at the MFA program at Brooklyn College, where Cari was a student. And imagine what a thrill it is for me to have been sitting in a room X number of years ago. Here's a pile of applications. Yeah. Oh, wow. Wow, this was good. Who is it? What's the name? Oh, Cari Luna. Put that down. And then poof, we're here. And now I get to ask you all the questions that I hate it when people ask me. You know, Cari, one of the things that is so impressive about this book, so interesting about it, is the way it deals with what I think is one of the great ongoing American themes, which is the search for a home. We come from Europe to the last of the last unspoiled continent. We move across the continent. We get to the Pacific Ocean, oops, out of land, and we're still looking. Yeah, anybody who doubts that, it's like spend a month in Brussels. Those people are at home in a way that we are just not. And I agree. I love pretty much anything set at any particular historical period in New York City, and this is a particularly fascinating and I think until today underexplored moment in New York's history. It's after the Tompkins Square Park riots, you know, when they cleared out the tent city and kind of made, in some people's view, the East Village safe for people who ought to actually feel endangered there. But there had been a big to-do about sort of quote-unquote cleaning up the neighborhood. And these people are, the story takes place among this small, not so small, sort of improvised family of people who are living in New York at the very last time in its history. I don't think this is coming back, when you could actually live here for nothing.
It's not coming back.
I'm not waiting for it. But it's a watershed moment. These are the last people who can arrive in the city and find a way to make do without earning in the high six figures. One of the questions you will often be asked, my own least favorite, I'm not going to ask it, but it's quite popular. Is the novel autobiographical? I've confessed that I've worked up a sort of stock response, which happens to be the true response as well, which is, you know, in my opinion, any novel that's any good is by definition autobiographical, in that the writer has found her or his way sufficiently deeply into the characters that you might as well be writing about yourself, even though the person and the life in question bears no resemblance to yours. That said, these people and their situation is clearly, I assume, not one you directly experienced.
No, it's never
Could you talk? Yeah, could you just talk a little bit about sort of how that idea arrived, where it came from, what held you to it?
Sure. Well, I started the novel right after I graduated from Brooklyn College. I was at Ragdale Colony.
Yeah, there's something going on with your mic.
Maybe because I forgot to press the button.
Wow, that was more than compensatory.
How about now? We good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I started the novel. That button's important, isn't it? I started it on October 2005 at Ragdale Colony. I had set off for the colony intending to write an entirely different novel. I have no idea now what that was. But I became pregnant with my first child, who's over there, Max. And Max and Olive are here tonight. Hey, Bobo. So I was 4 weeks pregnant with that gorgeous thing. And that changed the entire course of what I was writing, because suddenly I was trying to understand what it meant to be someone's mother. and what it was going to mean to raise children in New York, which got me thinking about New York in general and how it had changed. I was born in New York, moved to Jersey at 5, and came back as soon as I could, and I lived in the Lower East Side, and got priced out of there to Brooklyn. And the Lower East Side changed drastically in the time I was living there. And I wanted to understand what had happened in my New York and why I didn't quite feel like home anymore. And that's where the question of home came up. What happens when you haven't gone anywhere and you don't feel at home anymore? And I was never a squatter, but I did live in the neighborhood. And on July 4th of '95, I was walking through the neighborhood and came across a commotion at the intersection of 13th and A. And back then you moved toward commotions, and I went to, simpler times. I went to investigate, and the intersection was completely choked with police in riot gear and mounted police and bystanders, and it was a really, really tense, packed scene. I didn't really understand what I was seeing, but it turned out that a group of squatters who'd been evicted from buildings on 13th Street were symbolically retaking one of their buildings that night. While the city was distracted by the fireworks, they were moving back into their building, hanging a banner, Home Sweet Home, and then getting out before they were arrested. And it made a big impression on me. But I was 21 and not as intellectually curious as I wish I'd been, and I didn't look into it more at the time. I just kind of filed it away, but I always remembered that. And so when I started to think about what the hell happened in my city, why has New York changed, and gentrification seemed to be the answer to that, I remembered those squatters in that night, and I started to do more research. And I found out that the buildings they were retaking had been evicted that May 30th of '95 with SWAT teams, riot police, mounted police, snipers on rooftops, and an armored tank to clear, was it 60 people? Like 60 people from 2 buildings who'd been there for years. And so that seemed to be a big part of answering my question right there. The key to what the hell happened to New York is all of a sudden real estate values had gone up to the point where it made sense to the administration to spend $1 million to roll a tank down 13th Street and kick people out of their homes. And it kind of went from there.
Yeah. Am I still audible? I totally screwed things up. I took my jacket off.
No, but you didn't touch the button, so you're good.
Yeah, no, I just forgot that I was hooked up to my jacket, and I was going to break from heat frustration, and it was going to be distracting.
My brother's an EMT, and he's right there.
So one of the things I'm always interested in when anyone manages the miraculous feat of writing an entire novel, and a good one at that, is how it arrived, how it, I get it, about the idea behind the novel, and yes, of course, how shocking and yet somehow unsurprising that 60 impoverished people felt like such a threat. You know, what system are they a threat to? Let's think. But it's a big step from there to these fully fleshed, living characters who are actually living this life. Could you talk a little bit about getting from the idea of the novel to beginning to write the actual novel?
Well, the squats are really just the world that the characters move through. It's mostly a book about the people who live there and their relationships and the kind of unconventional families that develop in that kind of a community. And I was really interested in what happens to people at the moment when they realize that their life isn't turning out the way they expected, or that perhaps they had the wrong expectations, or didn't in fact have any expectations, and now what? So it started with just Garrett and Amelia and their relationship, and I followed them. I just followed them to the end, and it didn't work. I had focused too closely on their relationship because it interested me, and I wanted to tell this epic tale of New York, and it became very constricted just being about these 2 people. So then I added the 3 additional points of view, and it really opened up from there. And it's just, yeah, it was following each of their stories as they unfolded.
Yeah. I mean, one of the really impressive things about this book is what I will call its population management. I mean, there are 5 central characters and uncountable subsidiary characters, all of whom are vivid and alive. And one of the things I talk to my students about regularly is the question of creating characters who will be compelling to readers. And I often in a workshop, someone will say, I just didn't like this character. And Uncle Professor stays calm and says, I assume you mean that this character, the mystery of this character feels insufficiently revealed to you, because God save us from nice characters, nice enlightened characters.
Yeah.
There goes Emma Bovary, there goes Raskolnikov, there goes almost everybody great in literature. And you did a particularly fabulous, mysterious thing, creating these people who are how to put this? Well, they don't want to go shopping at Bendel's.
They really don't.
They don't really want jobs. They don't want to make a big splash in the world, and yet one identifies with them, one sympathizes and empathizes with them. Could you talk a little bit about that, about breathing life into characters who, in less adroit hands, might have felt sort of inert and opaque?
Well, as I learned from you, characters need to want something, and they need to fear something. And even if their desires aren't traditionally ambitious, everybody wants something, everybody's afraid of something. And for example, Garrett and Steve and Anne were motivated to squat for political reasons. For them, squatting was a form of direct action to create low-income housing. Garrett was a veteran of the Amsterdam squatting movement before he was in New York, hence him cursing in Dutch. I guess I didn't set that up very well. And but Amelia, on the other hand, she was a runaway. She needed a home. She kind of fell into it. So there's many different reasons for squatting as there are squatters. Amelia needed a home. She needed a family. She needed love. I think that's any reader can identify with that. Even, she didn't want to go shopping, but she wanted to find a family and be cared for and be safe. And so I think as long as the reader can identify isn't even necessarily the right word. But
Enter whatever you want. But feel some affinity. I feel like there was a thing on the paper. I don't know if you saw it. They actually did. I imagine doing a study like this, but people
about how we're all getting
who read a great deal of fiction are
literary
consistently literary fiction. Thank you. Buy 2 copies. Are sort of, were notably more empathic than people who don't read serious literary fiction, which just made me so happy. I have long argued that perhaps fiction's most indispensable quality, and the thing that I really believe, I mean no disrespect to other artistic media when I say that there's no other medium that quite does this. It shows you what it's like to be someone very different from yourself. So yes, if you're good, you make these characters legible, I guess, for lack of a better term, to the reader.
Well, that's a big part of why I write, actually, too. I'm greedy. I want more than one life. And when you write a character, you get to see the world through their eyes and imagine even the most minute details through their eyes and really live through them and do anything that you want through the writing of them. So maybe that's part of what makes them work, is if you really put yourself into each. It's not autobiographical, but yeah, each character is me in that.
I think you have to get to that point
Yeah.
as a writer.
Yeah.
So somebody, it was either Fitzgerald or G.D. Salinger who said the writer must not love the characters too much or hate them at all.
Who wants to write someone you hate?
People do.
I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I see any number of stories written often by students. The point at which the point of the story is to show you why these people are not worth writing a story about.
Yeah.
Uncle gets grumpy about that.
Yeah. I never did that.
No, you never did that. You know, listen, I would love to talk about that for a bit, about the whole, maybe second only in popularity to, it is not autobiographical, as can writing really be taught? By which they usually, what people usually actually mean is, we all know that writing cannot be taught. Aren't you ashamed of creating this fake job for yourself? I obviously don't feel that way. And I hope you'll feel free to talk about the entire experience of being a graduate writing student. I'm fine with the upside and the downside, but I think I would love to hear you talk about the still controversial in some circles notion of going into a program where you formally study writing for 2 years.
Well, the craft classes were helpful. I definitely left the program a stronger writer than I entered, but I think the best and most valuable thing from an MFA program is being given permission to take yourself seriously as a writer and being given that time to work. And then also finding peers, draft readers. My closest draft readers are in this room, and I met them at Brooklyn College, that guy. And that was absolutely invaluable because you can't do it alone. Nobody can write alone. You have to have someone to read your drafts and tell you, you've got some good things in here, but this really, really sucks right there and it wants attention. Someone who's going to not just say, it's great, you're brilliant, but fix this, it's not working here, here, and here, and this is why. And Brooklyn College was exactly where I found those people.
Yeah. No, that is very much, I think, at the heart of the whole of the matter. You are bringing together a community of gifted young writers and taking them seriously. And one's wildest hopes is that you will band together to Lou Gorilla cells.
And we did.
And keep on.
We did.
In a sort of, okay, so then you've got your MFA.
Mm-hmm.
I am always thrilled and astonished to see that somebody has actually finished a novel. I'm all the more thrilled if it's a good novel. But sometimes I'll walk into a bookstore and look around me and think, oh my God, all these people finished their books. Most of them are terrible, they finished their books. I think writing a novel is a sustained act of faith that in terms of its pure longevity leaves songwriting, painting, other fields of creativity really in the dust. You're spending years on something that might have no life at all in the world. Could you talk about that?
I had reason to believe this wouldn't have life in the world. This is my first published novel, but it's not the first one I wrote. I wrote a novel when I was your student that I finished it. It was my MFA thesis. I landed a really wonderful agent based on that novel. And she, while I was starting this one, she was shopping it around, and it never found a home. And it lives in her drawer forever. And we parted ways very amicably. She's wonderful. But that was while I was writing this, and she passed on this novel. We weren't a good fit. And so as I was finishing this, I had another novel that I had my big MFA ego. I really, which is gone now. it never occurred to me that my first novel wouldn't be published, because it happens to most people, but it wasn't going to happen to me. Of course, that first novel is going to get published, and then it didn't happen. And I had this, and I really got to a point where I didn't think it was going to happen for me, but I had to finish the book anyway. Well, mainly you can't live with me when I'm not writing. So I'm compelled to write, and I had to finish it, but I wrote it without any, I had hopes for publication, but I didn't believe necessarily that it was going to work out.
You know, it's funny, I had a similar experience.
And that helped me get through mine, actually. You told us that story.
Oh, right, okay.
I have a tiny Michael who lives in my head. And it's true, I'm sorry, it's true. And when things got really, really bad, I would remember the anecdotes that he told us in class, and I really leaned on do you want to tell the train platform story?
Oh, the train platform, oh, sure. You know, it's just as you say, I went to my MFA program, I thought, yeah, look out world.
Yeah.
Here it comes. You thought that sentence was good? Sentence. And expected, you know, I wasn't so grandiose. I was medium grandiose.
I was grandiose.
Yeah. I certainly thought things would happen, and then things kept not happening.
Yeah.
And the stories kept coming back from various publications, and I lived through a year and another year and another year, thinking, sure, it's probably going to happen, right? Yeah. I was in Providence, Rhode Island. I no longer felt particularly young. I think I must have been 30 by then, which seemed old at the time. And I was waiting for the train to take me to New York, where I was going to stay on a friend's couch for a little while until I could think of the next thing. I was with my friend Sarah, who I knew from graduate school, and I just literally sat down on the platform because there wasn't a bench close by. I just sat down on the cement and looked up at Sarah and said, I made a mistake. You know, I thought I was one of the few, but everyone thinks they're one of the few.
Yeah.
And it suddenly occurs to me that I may very well be a member of that much larger cohort of the aspiring writer population who wanted it, worked hard, had some knack for it, and it didn't go anywhere. Fuck me.
Yeah.
And Sarah, who was infurious and terrifying, said, oh, just get up. And I did. But I think this is what was interesting to me about hearing your version of this experience. I did get to a point where I thought to myself, okay, say it's looking more and more like you're one of the people. You're one of the almosts.
Yeah.
You're one of the almost, but not quite. It's late for a career in concert piano or pro ball. Ballet is out of question, but there's still, you could still do something else. And I really struggled with that, and I decided, you know what, I want to keep doing this, even if it goes nowhere. If I publish the occasional story in a tiny little quarterly and manage to get a job at a junior college in North Dakota, it's not what I had in mind, God knows, but I'll do it. And that's when things changed. And I think things changed because giving up on the idea of trying to please some hypothetical editor suddenly took the work to a whole other level.
Yeah.
When I actually was no longer trying to write something that someone would publish.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly right.
Yeah. I mean, once you stop trying to produce what you think people will want, oh my God, then you suddenly are producing things something people want.
Yeah, go figure.
Go figure. Why don't we bring other people in? Would people like to ask questions, make comments, say anything at all? Yes, please.
I was interested in what you said about research, because this was before the era of the internet, 94 it said. That's when you started writing it, isn't that right? Or,
yeah.
So, how did you go about doing that? Did you use in your public library, or what did you do?
I was very fortunate in that the internet was just beginning, and I was able to dig up some listserv posts between squatters, between groups. So, for example, I found a warning about the eviction that was coming. I found a lot of the radical journalism that had been done at the time had since been put online, and I was able to find that. And there aren't a lot of books on the topic, but there are a few, and they're excellent. Resistance, a radical social and political history of the Lower East Side, which is edited by Clayton Patterson, was really invaluable. And a book by Seth DeBachman, a graphic novel called War in the Neighborhood. But for the most part, I had to dig up archived newspaper articles and imagine the rest. I could have spoken to people who were there at the time, and I very deliberately chose not to. I didn't want to feel beholden to anybody else's version of the truth. I felt if I'd spoken to someone who'd been a squatter at the time, I would have felt really obligated to point of paralysis to tell the story the right way for them, and I didn't want to be constrained by that. I've since met and become friends with a number of people who were involved in the historical events that inspired the book, but I didn't speak to them as I was researching.
Who else? Let's get back to you, please.
What input did your editor have on the book, and what was your working relationship like with your editor?
Wonderful. I worked with Meg Story at Tin House. Let's see. We went through some big revisions. We eliminated, there was a third squat originally, and some battling between the squats, which really happened historically, but wasn't working in the book, because the third squat, which was called X squat, and they now only appear in the final version as a burned out shell of a squat in the beginning. Just to please myself, I stuck. There was an actual group who seceded from the adverse possession in the court case and were trying to undermine the remaining squats case against the city. And I couldn't make it work because I couldn't find any logic for their actions. And so we eliminated that storyline. I later came to find out by talking to squatters from the time that there was no logic to their actions. Nobody understood why they were doing it. So it wasn't really a failure of imagination on my part so much as I was trying to write about crazy people and failing. So we eliminated that entire storyline, which eliminated a fifth point of view character who's no longer in it. And then there was a secondary character, Steve's wife, Anne, who was really underobserved. And so I gave her own point of view. And I absolutely fell in love with her. And I can't believe I neglected her for so long. But that was at my editor's encouragement.
You know, Beth, what you said earlier about, I'm so glad you all have kept working together. How many people do you listen to?
Really listen
about
to?
an next, really listen to, yeah.
Let's see. 3. Two of whom are from Brooklyn College.
That's a good number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lon Kuntz and Emily Mitchell.
And how do you know when you're finished?
When it has to go to the printer and I'm not allowed to.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
I would go to bookstores and cross out after.
Which makes it a collector's item.
You have to just move on. Yes, please.
You talked about stopping and starting and trying to get things together for various projects, but what keeps you writing and what keeps you from writing, if anything?
The only thing that keeps me from writing are the realities of being a mother to 2 really small kids and not having a lot of time. I mostly have to choose between sleep and writing. Sleep usually loses out. That wasn't the case before kids. I feel a different urgency now because my time is so limited and it feels really precious. And what keeps me writing? I'm compelled to do it. I don't really understand what I think about anything until I write about it. And so I've got questions I want to explore, and they nag at me until I get a chance to work through them.
Do you write the questions down, or are they all in your head?
I don't have to write them down, 'cause they're just there and they're following me for probably a few months before I get to any given project.
You know, one of the more mysterious human attributes is will. It baffles the so-called experts in many fields. You are a psychotherapist. Your 10 o'clock patient gets better, your 11 o'clock patient doesn't get better. And they're about the same degree of disturbed. You know, you're an elementary school teacher. Here are two kids sitting side by side. Both of them live in one-room apartments with 5 brothers and sisters, and their mother's on drugs, and they don't know where their father is. And this one is okay. That one's not okay. And no one quite understands why some individuals can be marshal something that isn't accessible to other people. And I have found over and over again that there are two questions about a younger writer, any writer, but certainly a younger writer. Do you have some gift for it? But then there's this almost unrelated question. Will you sit in the chair and 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 write that goddamn sentence 35 times until it starts to feel alive? And I would put that right up there with talent as an essential aspect of being a writer. And it's mysterious. I do the same thing. I don't know why. It's nothing artistic. There's some kind of fixation.
Well, yeah, there's the drive, the compulsion to do it. Not naming any names, but there are people in every MFA program who won't write the story that they have to turn in for workshop until the night before, and they'll stay up all night, and they'll turn in often something really great. Sometimes they're the best writers in the group. From our group, I don't know that any of them have gone on to publish. You had this saying that there are two types of writers. There are the farmers and the ecstatics.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
That was one. Daddy's getting older.
It was
Daddy's not telling stories anymore.
It was a good one. So there are the people who are the ecstatics who are overtaken by inspiration, and they'll have fallow periods, and they'll write in great bursts and produce huge amounts in great bursts. And then there are farmers who work every day steadily and show up at the page, whether they're feeling it or not. And I'm a farmer.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
5 and 7, 40. Yeah,
I
farmer.
thought that the element background was very compelling, and I was curious how you were aware of it and
Of thalidomide?
Yeah.
Well, I was pregnant with my first child.
Do we all know about thalidomide?
You know, that hasn't come up in nobody's mentioned it.
Yeah, let's just quickly fill people in on what thalidomide is.
Thalidomide, yeah, actually it's being used again, unfortunately, not in this country. Thalidomide is, or was, a drug in the 50s and 60s that was given to, mostly in Europe, was given to women for morning sickness. It was produced by a company called Chemi Grunenthal, and they did very limited testing for safety, and what testing they did indicated that it wasn't necessarily safe for pregnant women. They rushed it to market, presented it as completely safe, and the result was, I forget the exact number, could be 10,000, 100,000, massive number of children born with, those whose pregnancies did reach completion, born with really severe birth defects. And it was banned, and now it's been brought back. It's being used as for leprosy. And you're supposed to be, it's supposed to be very closely monitored, but it's not necessarily being closely monitored, so we've got thalidomide children being born again in Africa and India and everywhere. I became aware of it. I was traveling in Europe, and when I was 20, I lived in Spain for my junior year. And I was traveling around Europe, and I became friends with a thalidomider. And he's the only thalidomider I've known. And I just kind of, okay, well, that's something really difficult for you and interesting, but I didn't look into it further. And then I was pregnant with my first child, and all of a sudden, vast number of things that could go horribly wrong seemed really present, and and concerning, and I remembered him. And as I was writing, Garrett became a thalidomide. He's got, Garrett the character has very mild deformities as these things go. His right forearm is foreshortened, and then just two fingers grow from it rather than a full hand.
Well, I also felt in the book your care about the pregnancy. I could tell that that the pregnancy was special to the mom.
It was. Another reason that the thalidomide came up and I decided to keep it in the story is because I felt there were some strong parallels between New York City's eviction of the squatters, being more concerned with the real estate value and big business over the well-being of the citizens, and this big pharmaceutical company being much more concerned with profits than the well-being of the patients who are being given their drug, and I felt there was an interesting parallel there. So.
You know, we should probably think about wrapping it up. The kids have to go to bed.
I'll sleep on Daddy's
A
shoulder.
last burning question or two, and then we'll say goodnight. Anybody? Yes, please.
It's a stupid question, I know, but I've always wondered, do you know how it's going to end? Do you just write day by day and you just write as you go?
Are people hearing the questions? It's a little late to ask right now.
The question
Everybody
was-
has a question?
I envision you with Post-it notes and outlines.
Index cards. I love index cards, but no outlines. No outlines, and another Michaelism about outlining. If you outline, the best that can happen is you get where you were planning to go. And if you don't outline and you allow for surprises, Michael also said our books tend to be smarter than we are. And yeah, you got a lot of good ones.
It's short. It's easy to remember.
Yeah. And so no, I don't write with an outline. I write with a general feeling where I think it might go, and maybe I'll plan a couple steps ahead just to give myself the confidence of aiming for something. But pretty often that'll change, and I'll follow it where it wants to go.
Well done.
Thank you.
Last one, please.
Yes. I just have a quick support question.
Yes, sir.
One, now that this book is published, are you still showing up as a farmer day by day and continuing new writing? And also, have you played with the idea, now that it's published, like who could play Garrett Bergen?
I'm working on the next novel. It's my first piece set in Portland. I moved to Portland in 2007. So yeah, I'm working on the next book. And I haven't allowed myself to entertain the casting of the film. Yeah, it'd be wonderful, but I can't go there.
Wow, Cari, it's amazing. You know, it really seems like day before yesterday I was reading your application manuscript. And here you are, and I have the temerity to be proud of you.